Thanks for your faithfulness and giving. And if you're a guest with us, take a moment and drop one of those Connect cards in the bucket as it goes by as well. And if you missed the bucket, we've got some boxes that are fixed to the back wall. Or you could go visit our Welcome Center out in the lobby. Or if you want to give, you can also give online at our website as well. So, well, I'm glad you're here. Welcome to Easter morning at West Salem Foursquare. This is a great time. We love celebrating the resurrection of Jesus. We love it. And it's a joy to be with you. I'm glad you've chosen to be here today. There might be a number of reasons why you're here. Okay? Let's just admit some of these reasons. Number of reasons why you're here. Perhaps you fall into one of these four categories. One of these four categories. Perhaps you are a committed person, all right? Perhaps you're, dyed-in-the-wool West Salemite. I mean, you've just been attending here, you serve here, you give here. This is your home church. Anytime the doors are open, anytime the lights are on, you're here, okay? I love you. Thank you for being here. All right, you're a committed person. Not committed like insane, just committed, okay? That may be true of some, but no, you're here, and we're so glad. You may fall into the second category. The second category would be considered kind of a casual attender. You're just checking things out. Maybe someone invited you to come. Maybe someone hands you one of those invite cards, or you got one at your work or at school, or you found it on your front porch at your house, or perhaps you even got drug along, right? I mean, it could be the case. I mean, you're not so much a casual observer as you're under duress. I mean, you've been brought here forcibly. You cannot have ham until you go to Easter service. That's what your wife said, or your whatever, you know. But anyway, you're checking out the claims of Christ. You're just kind of here and you're looking things over. You may also fall into another category, and that is people that are in crisis. People that are in crisis. Perhaps you are in a point of difficulty. Maybe you're facing some challenges. Maybe you've come to the end of your rope and you're saying, I just got to check out church. I got to check out Jesus. I got to get into something different than what I'm into right now, because what I'm into right now is a mess. I'm making a mess of my life and it isn't getting any better. And so perhaps that crisis is driving you towards the decision to be here today. You may fall into the fourth category. The fourth category of what I would call the cultural people. Cultural people are those that would say it's just a part of the fiber of being an American. Okay, you go to church on Easter. Okay, it's just what you do. It's kind of that cultural category. It's like dressing up, getting to church. It's like eating a hot dog at a baseball game. You know what I'm saying? Even if you don't want, how many know you don't necessarily want a hot dog? But you're at a baseball game. You eat the hot dog, you know what I'm saying? Or those of you that are perhaps not into the Super Bowl, okay, but you watch it. Why? Because you're an American, you know? Everybody watches the Super Bowl on Super Bowl Sunday. It's just what we do, whether we want to or not. Now, speaking of Super Bowl, how many of you know, if you've been a follower of Jesus for any amount of time, if you've attended church, how many know that in kind of church circles, Easter Sunday, it's like the Super Bowl for pastors, you know what I'm saying? Right? It's Super Bowl Sunday for churches. We've got record attendance. It's the biggest game of the year. You know what I'm talking about? Everyone's here. They're all looking good. They're ready to suit up. And you got record numbers. This is one of the largest attendances we've had all year long. The Rolling Stones are going to be playing at halftime. Get it? Rolling Stones. Roll the stone. Easter joke. Come on, people. It's all I got. Some of you are just waiting for me to have a wardrobe malfunction, aren't you, right? That's what you're waiting for. I mean, it's Super Bowl. Speaking of wardrobe, I'm wearing a suit, for crying out loud, you know? It's Easter Sunday. I never look like this, you know? So listen, this is how we do it here. We just pull out all the stops. Balloons fall from the ceiling and lights are flashing. You know, there's a lot of things we like to do. But listen, this is the deal. Sometimes, though, like when we watch the Super Bowl or we watch certain things or we get involved in certain things, we can see a lot of hype. And after all the hype is done, we still feel a little bit empty. We feel like, what did that give us? Is that something that's lasting? Is that something that's going to help me moving forward from this place? Oftentimes, that Super Bowl can get so hyped up, and yet the game is a dud. How many know that, right? Oh, you watch that game sometimes, you're like, oh, I'll never get those 3.5 hours back. It's like when you go to a restaurant based upon someone's recommendation, when they say to you, you've got to go to this restaurant. I've done that. I've promoted restaurants up here up front. Some of you perhaps have gone and you're like, what was Phelan thinking? This is terrible. Either the food was bad or the service was bad that particular time, but it was just a letdown. Or how many of you ever had a recommendation to go to a particular movie? Someone says, oh, you gotta see this movie. I was touting a movie to my family that I watched a few weeks ago with a friend of mine, and they never saw it, but I'm like, at Costco, I bought it. And I brought it home, and I'm like, we've got to watch this movie. This movie changed my life. It was the most incredible movie I've ever seen. And we put it on, and within about 25 minutes, everyone was sleeping. And I'm just like, what? You know how it is? You hype something up, and then you find out that it's like, nah, not a big deal. Hype does that. Hype leaves you feeling empty at times. It's like a balloon that, at a birthday party, you got the balloon blown up and it's awesome. But then you wake up the next morning, only to discover it had a slow leak, and now it's all shrivelly in the corner of your living room. Hype does that. It leaves you feeling kind of not all there. And sometimes that can happen with Easter. Sometimes we wonder, is this just a bunch of religious hype? What's happening? They're promoting it for months, and then the day comes and it's like, meh. Friends, here's the deal. Aside from balloons and kicking the band up and all that, listen, we don't need more hype. We need hope. We need hope. Hype is exhilarating, but hope is enduring. It goes on and on. Hype, it's like a sugar high. You feel great for a moment, but then in an hour or even less, you just feel gross. See, all human beings, in my opinion, are hopers. We're hoping for something. It's why people wake up in the morning. They're hoping. It's why they get out of bed. It's why people buy Bowflexes. Isn't that true? I mean, it's why they go to the sports clubs. It's why they read self-help books. They're hoping to be better. It's why people will go on blind dates. It's why people play the lottery. They're hoping. And we can spend our whole life just hoping after things, like a child on a Christmas morning or a child on an Easter morning looking for their eggs in their Easter baskets. They're just hoping they find a bunch. Frankly, our kids are still in that mode. We've got kids now, they're 22, 19, 17, and 13, and they all wake up on Easter morning. This has happened since they were very, very young. They still, to this day, wake up so amped to find their Easter basket. Oh, our son, our oldest, is going to be coming from his church in Portland. He'll be down here in a couple hours. The first words out of his mouth when he enters our home, I know it'll be, "Where's my Easter basket?" And he'll go running around trying to find it. We hope for that kind of stuff. Man, we can't wait. Here's the question that I want to ask you, though, today. And we could talk a lot about the things that are around us that we want or we're hoping for, but frankly, when it all boils down, we've got to answer the question of, where are you placing your hope? Better yet, in who are you placing your hope? It's an important question to answer. And before we can answer it, I want to deal with a couple of hurdles, some things that stand in our way. We'll call these high hope hurdles, if you will. A couple hurdles that we've got to get over. And they're big ones, okay? We deal with them, we struggle with them. The first hurdle, if you're taking notes, is this. It's the hurdle of cynicism. The hurdle of cynicism. We can have people say to us, just keep on hoping, right? And you're like, I've done that. Been there. I bought the t-shirt, man. I don't know how to do this anymore. Every time I, kind of hold up my hopes, it's like they just get dashed again and again and again, and you're afraid your heart's just going to get trashed. Why would you want to do that? So cynicism is a way of kind of building up a wall, a protective thing around our hearts that just says, I'm not going to let anyone else in right now. I've hoped and I've been hurt. The second hurdle that we face, and you may be facing this today, is a hurdle of circumstances. Circumstances that are happening around you or maybe to you, things, events, points of challenge in your own life that you're saying, man, I don't know how to get past this. I was hoping, but now this has happened. Now this relationship is fractured. Now this business went south. Now this marriage is ending in divorce. Now we're facing this death. It's a gal I spoke with last night, just at the services last night. Husband took his life last week. I mean, these are times where you look at circumstances and go, how am I going to hope again? We also deal with a third thing. A third, hurdle, if you will, and this is a big one. It's cliches. Sometimes we just kind of banter out and we throw out these real cutesy things, the quick and easy fixes. When someone's facing a circumstance or a challenge in their life, people come along and they'll be like, well, listen, all things work together for the glory of God, for all those that are called according to his purpose. You're like, shut up, I think, right? You don't want to hear that. Someone's like, hope springs eternal. You're like, I don't even know what that means. Well, listen, buddy, even if there's a glimmer of hope, how about I just glimmer right in your face, We just don't have the time for that kind of stuff, these trite, these overused phrases. And I hope to not bring that to you today because, listen, we don't need more cliches. We've got enough circumstances that are presenting themselves as big obstacles right in our way. Our hearts can get hard. They can become cynical. And I want us to address those things, but I want us to look at it through the lens of something in the scripture. If there's any two people on the planet during the days of ancient Israel that had people coming to them with cliches, it would have been Abraham and his wife Sarah. They were unable to conceive a child. They couldn't conceive for whatever reason, and people, I'm certain, would come along to them saying, well, if you just tried this, if you just try that, if you just stand on one leg and pat your belly and this. No, friends, we don't need more overused comments. What was happening in their world was a point of real shame because in ancient Israel, for someone to not be able to conceive, unlike today, this is not an issue today, but back then it was a very, very severe mark upon them, a point of shame if they were unable to conceive. And so here's Sarah at 90 years old. Here's Abraham at 100 years old. When the angel of the Lord comes to him, we can read about it in Genesis 18. The angel of the Lord comes and says this to Sarah. Hey, Sarah, by this time next year, you're going to have a child. What? Listen, friends, Sarah did not run out and buy a car seat. She didn't. She did not post on Facebook, angel of the Lord said, I'm having a baby, that kind of thing. No. What we see in the scripture is Sarah, she just verbally and audibly laughed. She said this is a direct quote. She says, after I'm worn out and my husband is old, now I will have this pleasure? Let me put it in kind of layman's terms so you don't understand what she said there. Basically, she said to the angel of the Lord, look at me. No, better yet, look at him. This ain't happening, bucko, Right? My goodness. No wonder she would laugh. You look at something like that and you're saying this isn't possible. And by the way, this is not the first time they've had to get over this hurdle. The Lord had spoken to Abraham prior to this, had come to him and said, Abraham, you will have offspring that are as numerous as the stars in the sky and as numerous as the sand upon the seashore. I don't know if you've ever tried to count either one of those. But it's a lot. And to hear that and to think to yourself, well, how is that possible? Because I have no children. Not one. It takes at least one child to begin this journey of getting that ball rolling and having offspring as the Lord has said. How can the Lord make that kind of promise? How can he do that when they had no children? Well, here's how. Let's look at the book of Hebrews, chapter 6. I'll put it on the screen for you. It says this. For example, there was God's promise to Abraham. And since there was no one greater to swear by, God took an oath in his own name, saying, I will certainly bless you, and I will multiply your descendants beyond number. And then Abraham waited patiently, and guess what? He received what God had promised. Now, when people take an oath, they call on someone greater than themselves to hold them to it. And without question, that oath is binding. God also bound himself with an oath so that those who received the promise could be perfectly sure that he would never change his mind. So God has given both his promise and his oath. These two things are unchangeable because it is, say this word with me, it is what? Impossible for God to lie. Therefore, we can run to him for refuge, and we can have great confidence as we hold on to the hope that lies before us. We have this hope as an anchor for our soul. It is firm and it is secure. We have this hope. This hope is an anchor for our soul, friends. It's firm, it's secure. Abraham, Sarah, they didn't need more hype. They didn't need more high fives. They didn't need someone to come along and say, you can do it. I'm all for encouraging one another. But friends, when you're in a dark place like that, you don't need hype, you need hope. It's an anchor for our soul. And that hope, that promise that they received from the Lord, he was faithful to fulfill it. If you know the end of the story, the Lord gave them a son. And they named that son Isaac. And if you know your Bible, you'll know that the name Isaac means in the original language, catch this, laughter. The very woman who laughed at the angel of the Lord saying, I will never have a child. Look at my husband, look at me. It's not going to happen. Was now holding laughter in her arms. You see, there's an anchor, and this anchor is hope. And it's for our soul. Tomorrow morning, bright and early, myself and Denise and about 35, 38 of us from this church, we're going to hop on a plane in PDX and fly to LA. And then we're going to switch planes and fly from LA to Istanbul. And then from Istanbul to Athens. And we'll begin a 10 or 11-day journey called the Journeys of Paul. We're going to follow in the footsteps of the Apostle Paul in the places that he wrote letters to, Corinth and Athens and Ephesus. And we're going to go on to the islands of Crete and Patmos and Mykonos and Santorini and work our way all the way up to Rome. And when we get to Rome, I've been on this tour before and I know what we're going to do on that last day. We're going to go down into the depths of the earth, go all the way down in what's called the catacombs. These catacombs were early Christian burial sites, and they were chambers, if you will, that also became places of worship, and they were hiding places. I mean, these early followers of Jesus were being persecuted intensely by the Emperor Nero and being killed, and those chambers, not only places of worship, but ultimately became the places where their bodies would lay. And as it was excavated years later, they discovered something, and that was an image. And this image became an image that they found over and over and over, more so than any other image, a carving or a painting upon the walls of these catacombs. This image was found 66 times. There's probably more, but they haven't excavated it fully. But 66 times they found an image of an anchor. Why? Because they needed hope. They needed hope. They were running. They were scared. They were an upstart group of people trying to follow the Messiah, and now they're being killed for it. This anchor is hope. Regardless of what situations you find yourself in, they may not be as dire as what they were in, but regardless of what situation you find yourself in, no matter the crisis, no matter the challenge you're in right now, friends, listen to me. There is something greater to hold on to. Something greater. Hebrews chapter 10, it tells us, let us hold unswervingly to the hope that we profess, for he who promised is faithful. He who promises is faithful. Friends, God's promises, they don't depend upon our faith. How many are glad for that? Right? The faithfulness of God has very little, if nothing, to do with how faithful we are, because we are a faithless people. We're constantly walking away from the Lord, but the Lord never walks away from us. His promises are dependent upon his faithfulness. An anchor is only as secure as to that which it is fastened. And if that anchor is fastened to you and I, we're in some deep trouble. How many of you would admit that? We're in some deep trouble. It isn't dependent upon us. It's dependent upon the promises of God. Thanks be to God that our hope is founded in him and not in us. It's fastened to a God who is unchangeable, fastened to a God who is firm, fastened to a God who is secure. And the rest of us, we're wishy-washy. We're all over the map. But he stuck the landing. He's right there and he never moves. There's a Greek philosopher, his name was Epictetus. He wrote this: one must not tie a ship to a single anchor, nor life to a single hope. Now, friends, I'm sure he's a pretty smart guy. Greek philosopher and all. Pretty smart guy. But in this, he had it wrong. We can tie our life to a single anchor. We can tie our life to a single hope. That hope is Jesus. We don't need a backup. We don't need somebody to come along and say, let me help you also, because Jesus may not be enough. Friends, Jesus is always enough. He's the only one that we can tie our life to and know that we're not going to run adrift. In 1 Peter chapter 1, it declares this. It says, praise be to the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. In his great mercy, he has given us new life into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. See, the good news today is that there was a man named Jesus who was born upon this planet, the very planet we're a part of. He was born into this planet the same way we came into this planet. He breathed the same air we're breathing right now. He walked the same ground that we walk today. Listen, friends, that's where the similarities change, though, because he lived a sinless life. No one else can claim that in this room. He lived a sinless life. He died a cruel, unjustified death upon a cross, a very, very disgusting death. He was placed into a tomb. There was a stone that was rolled in front of it. It was a very heavy stone. And people may be thinking, well, what's so good about that good news? Friends, if you look at it from the exterior and you look at it through the eyes of our own flesh, we could look at this and say, well, that's bad news, frankly. He's dead. Even the followers of Jesus at that time were thinking, what have we pinned our hopes to here? Our Messiah, he's been arrested. Now he's been killed. This is the one that we left our jobs for. This is the one we left our homes for. Man, we've been following this guy for 3.5 years. And now what? Look at what's happening here. Imagine how discouraging that would be. They're watching hopes being dashed. But we know, if you know the story, that's not it. There was a Good Friday in Bangladesh, and they'd gathered in a church. Hundreds of people packed in this church. Kids all over the floor, adults standing towards the back. And the missionaries that were there had brought with them the most translated movie in the history of mankind. It's called a Jesus film. And this Jesus film was on a reel-to-reel and was being projected onto a sheet at the front of the church. And all the kids watched, and everyone watched with just absolute horror as they saw this crucifixion scene, the nails going into their hands, into the hands of Christ, and into the feet of Christ, and they're just gasping, and they're cringing, and some were leaving the room. They were disgusted. They couldn't believe what they were seeing. They'd never seen it portrayed like that before. And they're so visibly emotional that at one point, a young little man, just a little guy, he stands up. He's like, I gotta fix this. He stands up and goes and stands in front of the whole church, and he yells out, he's like, don't be scared. Don't be scared. He gets up again. I've seen this one before. Right? How many know we've seen this before? We know Jesus is alive now. We didn't pin our hopes on a dead man. We didn't pin our hopes on someone who didn't come out of the grave. He's alive and well, and we know we can trust him. We know we can trust him. No matter what you're facing today, no matter what obstacles in front of you, what hurdle is there is a hope that lies before you. Hear me, friends. It is the anchor for our soul. And this isn't hype. This isn't hype. I'm passionate about it, but I don't want to hype this up. I just want to present to you hope. Like on the very first Easter, friends, I can see it. It's still rising. Hope is still alive. It's not dead. Easter's not just about the hope of life after death, friends. It's about the hope of life before death. And some of you need to know whether or not you have an eternity secured with Christ in heaven with God the Father. And we're going to pray about that in a moment. Still, others of you are saying, man, I'm not so much concerned about then. I'm just thinking about now. Right now, it's bad. And you're looking for hope right now. It's what we all want. It's what we all need. It's what Johnny needed. I want you to see his story. Watch this with me.
I would say the call came into the barracks probably between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning from the Red Cross. Just trying to track me down. I was made aware that there'd been an accident. I got my mother on the phone first, and she was extremely emotional. She said, there's been an accident. Greg took his own life. I just got stuck in that payphone in the barracks for just what felt like ever. I would say disbelief was where I was at. I just didn't think it was real. I especially didn't want it to be real. But it was. I still had responsibilities and job-related things to accomplish every day. So I guess in kind of a numb fashion I did so. But when I was alone, I just didn't like anything that was going on. I didn't like life. Probably some of the darkest corners of me. Maybe I even envied my brother because I just wouldn't have to deal with it. After disbelief, then it was just kind of the cold reality that my brother's gone. The guy who made me laugh like no one could. I needed something to just kind of fill a void, to just when I wasn't on the job, I needed something to kind of fill me up and take me away all at the same time, and alcohol seemed to do that really well. I kept drinking, late nights, destructive behavior, dishonesty with myself, with others. The people you don't want to hurt are the ones that you hurt the most, whether it's through dishonesty or just destructive behavior. But it was family, my wife, my daughter. I just pushed them away, or I stepped on them. And it was through some of the pain that I could see I was causing that I realized just how empty I was, how hopeless my situation was. I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it that way anymore. I didn't want to do it that way anymore. It was during kind of one of these blow-ups that I had ended up separating from my wife and from my daughter. Got my own place, and I got a roommate. My roommate came to church. He came home, told me he liked it, had good things to say about it. I didn't really know I was looking for a church. I just knew I was looking for a change. So a couple weeks later, I came to West Salem Foursquare Church for the first time. It seemed like a great bunch of people, but I got in the car and left when it was over. A couple weeks later, I came back. Another great message. Again, a happy people. Got back in my car, went home. At some point, I felt like maybe I should talk to someone. So I came to church, but it was after hours. There was no one here. So I just sat in the parking lot. And I don't know if you'd call it clarity, not epiphany. I was made aware that I was at the end of doing things and living life the way I had. I was letting too many people down, myself, my family. I was looking for some peace. I needed some hope. God had been waiting for me. He hadn't left me. I'd left him. But he was waiting patiently for me. It became about what was missing in relation to all of our problems. And that was, we believe, the love of Christ. Even with the loss of my brother and everything that was involved there, it's really obvious to me that what was missing was hope. And the only way I could find that hope was by opening my heart to Jesus and once and for all feeling the love of Jesus and just being okay with being me.